Endgame technique is one of the crucial skills in chess to really score the full points. That's why today we're gonna have a look at an Endgame Masterclass by Grandmaster Rauf Mamedov, and so you will be able to copy his strategies into your own games after this video. So let's dive into the game, which was played in the European Club Cup 2024, and we're starting from this position here where Mamedov was playing the black pieces and he was an exchange down and basically started into this endgame with a more or less losing position, but nonetheless could beat his also very strong opponent, almost 2500 with the black pieces from here. And we will see a few key principles which he applies to really generate some problems in this position. So the game continued with f3, which is already a bit inaccurate, and I really like the next move by black. And what he played was bishop to c2. This move is really great because it points at a lot of things. First, black is really telling, I also have a strength here. This pawn on d4, it can be very dangerous, especially with the bishop on c2. It's almost as valuable as a rook. Maybe sometimes even more. They protect each other and the white rook is really caged in. And that's basically already the first principle in endgames. Activate your pieces and restrict the enemy pieces. And with bishop c2 we do such a great job restricting the rook on d2. So that was great. White should not have allowed this, and instead he should have activated his rook on his own. For example, rook a2, supporting the pawn from behind, very classical, and white would have had great winning chances. But in the game this didn't happen and the rook was caged in. Rook a7 is another mistake. White should not help black again to activate his next piece. The king is now joining the game, and as we will see, the king might play a very active role here. So while white is moving around a bit aimlessly, black is getting in his next piece as bishop and rook are already playing. Now the king is joining as well. Instead, the rook would have done a better job attacking some targets like the h4 pawn while still cutting the king off, and it's also very important to maybe free the own king, and this could be achieved if white was able to remove those pawns in time. So rook a7, black of course went into the center with his king, activating the last piece, and after a5 black played d3, kind of freeing his rook from the defense of this bishop, also creating this route for the king to invade, and we will soon see where the rook is going once it is free. So a6 played, and here comes a very, very typical endgame move, and if you want to challenge yourself or think about the position a little bit, try to pause the video here and try to decide where to go with the rook. Should we put it on c6 or on a4? And the right answer is a4, because the rook is usually best placed behind the pawn, because once you imagine a situation where white is going forward, this rook on a8 will be very caged in, whereas if we go from the side, there are always some easier tricks to get the rook out, because our rook on c6 or later c7 would not cover the queening square, and in general our rook is way more active on the whole a file than it would be on the 6th rank. So rook a4 was a great move, and after that rook a8, black needs to take a little care that he will have no problems with his king, because white's idea is basically to play a7 and after that give a check with the rook, freeing the a8 square for the pawn and then queening and gaining a lot of material. But black usually has two ideas to hide the king away, and I will show both of them to you because they are quite essential, and once you master them and understand them, you will apply them in many situations, in many games. So it is not just a one-time thing, but it will really help your level of chess grow. So the first spot where you can hide the king is in general g7 and h7. And the reason for this is that if the king goes here and the pawn goes here and the king would just be waiting here, the rook could give this check, but the rook would be gone, and after that the queen would be unprotected. So that's not successful for white. So now you might ask, okay, why does it exactly have to go to g7 or h7 and not maybe to like e7? Because also on e7 you could take the rook on e8 and there would be no queen. But there is this very standard trick that the rook could now, if the king would stay on the 7th rank, could not give the check on d8, but instead would go to h8 and then prepare a skewer. If the pawn would now be taken, then the black rook would drop. So that's why h7 and g7 are the only two good squares here, because then there will be no skewer because the rook cannot come around. So that's version number 1, but as we will see, this is not good here, and the key reason for this is that the king might be kind of safe against any rook checks or against any skewers, but the king is not active. And we would rather prefer to have an active king because, yeah, we need to activate all the pieces in the endgame. And sometimes there is this chance that we can also hide the king in front of another piece, and this time in front of the pawn. Now if black goes a7, there, yeah, will be no check with the rook, and whenever the white rook moves, the pawn will be taken. So that's the more active idea, and of course you need to make sure that this king can stay here and it won't be forced to go to d6 or somewhere else. But here it just won't. The white rook cannot really force the king away. It would take a lot of time, and in the game black took care of exactly this. Actually in the game black first started with rook to a1, closing in this rook completely. It cannot now free himself here because there is no longer access to the f1 square. So white tried to, yeah, push the pawn further, but now black in the last moment, but of course it's possible, and black saw all this, could hide the king on e5. And now this is kind of a Zugzwang for white already. White cannot move his king, just no square. White does not really like to move this rook because otherwise the pawn would drop. And if he would move this rook here, okay, that's the last move available, but maybe we can take away this option or improve our position in that case. And we will see how black managed to do that. But white is really running out of moves here, and the reason for that is that he just did not get the pieces into play. Meanwhile, all the black pieces are in perfect shape, and we would just need one more idea to make some progress, and we will see how black is doing that. So after rook f2, black moved the bishop again, which at first sight may seem a bit weird because the bishop was so good there, but the bishop couldn't make the pawn move forward. So now the bishop is taking on a new job, having different ideas. First, hit the rook on a8. So now the a7 pawn will more or less be lost. And also it is creating a spot for the king to walk forward without being checked. So that's actually what happened. The rook went away, but there was no rush taking the a7 pawn, but black rather wanted to keep his own d3 pawn, to keep the chances and play for win here. If black instead took the a7 pawn, the d3 pawn, and with that also all the black advantage or the black chances would be gone, and white would actually be better because this is actually black's biggest asset overall. So king went here, white took this h4 pawn, and materially speaking white has a lot, but now he's losing one of the rooks, and even though this final position here should be a draw because white has 3 pawns against bishop and pawn, and this pawn is not a passer and it's incredibly hard for black to attack something. This is exactly the situation where the computer will fool you, where it's saying this is equal, but basically black is pushing for the win like forever, and white really needs to defend like for 50 moves to make it to the 50 moves draw rule or something, and really take care that he won't blunder. And this is so hard in practice, and yeah, black put a lot of pressure and white finally collapsed. So we will see the end of the game, but this is very typical. Again, he shows this good technique of improving all the pieces. First the king comes in, the rook is improved, eyeing this weakness on g2, and then the king will again try to invade to f2. First, we need to expel the white king again, secure the f2 square, then invade with the king, and finally we are ready to create some targets. The g2 pawn is now very vulnerable. White's last escape was more or less to play f4 here, trying to trade the last pawn off, but it is very dangerous. For example, after f4, black could try something like rook to g7, and after that, for example, g4. This g4 pawn can already be taken and white cannot recapture because he's mated on the h-file. So white would need to go into something like that, but that actually looks a bit scary because the king is not having that many squares, and it might seem there is an attack or something, but actually white is holding here. So instead, white did not go for this f4, but defended passively with rook to g4. But now all the trouble starts. Now f4 is no longer possible because the pawn is pinned. And after a few more moves, rook h7, white became a bit too impatient and played h4, which is the final mistake of the game, because now h4 is a weakness as well, and black comes around targeting it. Bishop d3, intending bishop f5, rook goes away in advance, and now there is this nice e4. White cannot take the pawn because of the checkmate on h4, but neither can he allow the pawn forward, and so the position is already losing here. They followed the rook to b2, bishop e2. Now e3 is a threat as well as rook h4, and after e3 the game went down very quickly for white. So here black is in full control. The white pawns are going nowhere, and the e3 pawn will decide the game. Check, and white resigned. So I really hope you could learn something from this endgame masterclass. Summing up, I want to emphasize the key principles, which are: look for counterplay, activate all your pieces, and yeah, that's basically it. Take care, play through this game again if you really want to understand it, when you want to dive into more details, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.